You're listening to the Therapist to Millions podcast, where we get under the skin and into the brains of the world's leading therapists with Dr. Susan Spicer and myself, Damien Mark Smith, as we delve into the world of all kinds of effective therapies with fascinating and challenging cases, plus marketing tips and what's really working in mental health right now. Hello and welcome to the Therapist to Millions weekly podcast, where we get under the skin and into the brains of therapists and coaches all around the world. And today we have a very special two guests on the show. Not only are they coaches, but they are husband and wife coaches who have a very similar story and a very similar best-selling books that came out within a week of each other. Actually, this is absolutely fascinating. Please welcome to the show husband and wife Daniel Junkins and Jana Scholten. Now let's start with Jana first, because her diagnosis was earlier. So in the year 2000, Jana was diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis, and she was told she would be disabled in 10 years. But she decided to take her life by the bullhorns and become a vegan triathlete, a meditation guru, and visualized her way to health. And she's today in benign status, drug-free, and a healthy endurance athlete. And then she met Dan in 2005, and in 2017, Daniel was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia with just weeks to live. And while receiving his diagnosis as one of the most, as well as the most powerful chemotherapy protocols in the cancer world, Dan discovered the powerful story of the peacock and its innate ability to ingest poison, creating a powerful mantra and mobilizing support from all communities of people in his life. And actually, that's the reason there's so much color in the peacock's feathers, by the way. So, guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here. We're very excited
to be here.
Absolute pleasure. Now we're going to talk about your books in a little while. So Daniel's book is Peacock's Poison and Leukemia, and Jana's is Enchanted Wellness. And say they came out within a week of each other, beginning of this year, and both went to Amazon bestseller status. So it was this year, wasn't it? It wasn't last year.
Yeah, it was.
It was this year, wasn't it? Yeah. So let's just start with, who wants to go first? Let's do it in historical order, yeah. So, Jana, just give us a little bit of a background, and also how you both ended up, sharing what you're doing through the book and through workshops and programs that you're creating now.
Okay. Well, I, as a result of my diagnosis and actually recovery from multiple sclerosis, it all really started with a mindset shift. That's really was the key ingredient essentially in recovering and healing myself fully from MS. And so from there, I decided, so many people had said, you should write a book, you should write a book, you should write a book, you should write a book. And then it was really doing a large program, Message to Millions, that really inspired me. And then COVID happened, so I lost my normal job, and so I was like, well, I might as well write my book now. So yeah, that's really what started. I had the time to do it, and I was like, I'm going to create my own path. So that's why I wrote my book and caused it to be Amazon bestseller. So, and then just creating a coaching practice around my own healing path and creating a powerful mindset and shift in mindset around people's health and well-being, and helping others do the same as what I did. Essentially, that's what I'm up to now.
What was that moment in the book that you described so eloquently, where you got on the phone to your consultant, and that was kind of like the mind shift change for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the hugest. When I was having an attack of complete vertigo, I woke up one morning just to go for a run, and I was fine. And when I bent over, I put my tennis shoes on, I fell over, and the whole room was spinning. I had complete vertigo. So I crawled over to the phone and called my friend and coach, and I said, David, I don't know what's going on, but the whole room is spinning, and I can't move. And he essentially said to me, well, do you realize that you have something to do with this? And I was like, what? I don't have anything to do with it. MS just happens to me. I'm a victim. I can't do anything about it. He's like, well, I just want you to consider that you do. And that maybe what were you thinking in the moment? And I was like, oh, I was worried about a presentation I was doing that night with him. And I'm like, I can't do this. And I just had a lot of negative thoughts. And he's like, well, I think that your body is really just reacting to all your negative thoughts. And it caused an attack of complete vertigo. And I'm like, wow, I never thought about that. He goes like, so just consider that you do have something to do with MS and call me back later. So I really thought about what he had to say. I was like, wow, that was profound. And so all I could do was just go to bed. And when I woke up a few hours later, the attack was gone. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Because I had MS like several years before that. And attacks would last weeks to months at a time where I'd be completely disabled, completely bedridden, and I couldn't do anything. And I really had nothing there. And I was like, well, this must be what they call mind-body medicine. And because a friend of mine had told me about that a couple of years ago before that. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to look into mind-body medicine. And I started the mind-body medicine program. And but then after I had symptoms thereafter, I would just say to myself, okay, I would go through this 4-step process and I could release the symptoms within minutes. And I would just say, who am I being? What am I saying to myself? Are those thoughts true? And they never were. It was just negative chatter. And then I said, who can I be? And who do I want to be? And then I would just create that, like a vital, healthy, or something, energetic. And then within like I did that like numerous times. And then I finally got to a space I could just do that whole process, and these symptoms, I could make the symptoms just disappear just like that within seconds. I was like, wow, if I can do this, I can fully heal from MS. So I kind of took mind-body medicine to the nth degree, and I found a therapist through the Mind-Body Center that taught me visualization. And then I had a timeline because I had an MRI scan, which is how they measure you in MS, how your brain scan's doing. And I had meditated and visualized every single night, and I imagined my lesions shrinking in my brain and me being healthy. And then within 3 months, the MRI results showed that my lesions, the scars in my brain were shrunk. And my neurologist was like, wow, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it. And then he put me in a special study to figure out why. And my symptoms on a scale from like 10 to 1, they were like a 8.5, 9, almost 9, and they went down to a level 1. And that's when I was like, wow, this is amazing. So, but I was still on this drug, shooting myself with needles, and that wasn't any fun. So I had gone to this alternative support group with people with MS, and a lot of them just changed their diet. So I started doing research about the plant-based diet, and I was a triathlete. And back then, because the doctor told me I'd be disabled within 10 years, and a triathlete's book just kind of fell in my face, essentially, at a bookstore. And so my husband and I slowly went from a meat and potatoes diet to plant-based, kind of tree-hugging, hippie vegan. So, yeah, so then the symptoms really started disappearing completely. And then I say within a year, I had gotten off the drug and just threw my box of needles on the bed and said, I'm done. I'm taking my power back, and I don't need the drugs anymore. And so I just decided to do the, anti-inflammatory plant-based diet instead, and along with mindset and meditation daily.
Wow, that's amazing. So then So then let's jump across to Dan for a minute. So then when you got the diagnosis, there must have been sort of a part of you like going, well, I've kind of got a bit of a route map here about how I can what I can do
It's
about it.
That's really true. I mean, don't get me wrong. When you're diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia,
2 weeks to
and
live, yeah.
2 weeks to live, I did go through, I would say, a panic attack for about 4 hours, but it was shortened quite dramatically. One, because I was slowly but surely really gaining a lot of trust with the doctors and nurses that were surrounding me. I was getting all this attention, and I kind of like that. I think probably because I'm a Leo. But at the same time, the thoughts were going through my mind that if I have this, I wonder if I could just heal myself the way Jana healed herself from multiple sclerosis.
Mm-hmm.
And I had gone through a week of what I thought was a flu prior to that diagnosis. So I literally had no idea that something like leukemia was going to come down the road, especially considering there's no family history in my family of any blood cancers of any kind. So yeah. And they had me in the emergency room the whole first day. And at the end of the day, they did transfer me into a room in the hospital that night. And they prescribed the hardest and toughest and strongest chemotherapy protocol in the cancer world. Because based on their interview with me, they felt that I was young enough and strong enough to handle it. And I was visited by my mother, my two best friends, my brother, my uncle, all in the hospital room. And it was that night when they made that prescription for the chemotherapy recommendation. And so after everybody had left, after that diagnosis, I kind of dropped into a meditative sort of state and just got very quiet, trying to absorb the day, having gone from my house ready to go to work to being diagnosed to all of a sudden having chemotherapy the next day. So I would say it was like this blissful state of just relaxation, being sort of close to this person that had this miraculous recovery, and being around her.
See me go from sick to healed.
Yeah.
I mean,
that I started meditating, and then all of a sudden this mantra came into my head out of nowhere. And the mantra was, dive into uncertainty with courage and surround everyone with love. And it kept repeating itself. It wouldn't stop until I finally grabbed a notebook and a pen and wrote it down on the paper. And then as I was falling asleep, I remembered, I don't know why, but I remembered a story that I had read about peacocks. And the story talked about the fact that peacocks kill and eat poisonous snakes and plants for sustenance. And so it was basically inside of a whole conversation about the different spiritual paths within the Hindu religion, talking about how walking down a path and being presented by a poisonous plant as a way of living life, that one way of dealing with it is to cut the plant, remove it, and that's one way to deal with problems that you are presented with in life, that you resolve the problem, you move on. Another way is to do it by going to the root of the plant and removing the root as well. And the same would be approaching a problem, that you get to the root of the problem and you resolve it. The third way being the way of doctors, where they could actually transform that poison into medicine. And then the final way is the way of the peacock, who literally ingest the poison, they eat it, and they find sustenance from it. It's almost like dessert for them. And so for me, I was inspired by that story as a metaphor for my own way of relating to the chemotherapy, that I could ingest it or take it in and consume it and see and allow for my body to enjoy it. It's like kind of embrace it. And so I was warned prior to having the chemotherapy that I would lose my hair that I would lose weight, that I would have extreme fatigue. And that was all true. That all happened except for the weight. I actually gained 30 pounds during the chemotherapy, and they were really surprised by that, especially with the strength of the chemo. Jana gained weight too, nervous weight, during my chemotherapy. And so that for me was a real profound moment to discover that I actually had some power, like I had my hands on the levers and whatnot, and without even recognizing that was a possibility. But knowing her and her own experience, I found the power of the mind and the body, and that connection. And while I was in the hospital, obviously, I became sort of I couldn't stop talking about the peacock story to people, to the nurses, to the doctors. I was kind of relentless about it. And on top of that, Jana actually organized a whole team of people. What's that?
Oh, because I did PR.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
PR,
Jana had a PR background.
I created
anyway.
a PR campaign around getting the word out about Dan.
Exactly. So. She said, all right, you're going to have to dig up and try and remember all the people in your life, in your whole life. So she actually came up with a list of 987 people and, reaching out to them by email, letter, phone calls, on Facebook, and asking them for help and support, whether it be money, whether it be food, whether it be visits, whether it be cards, whether it be
cleaning
emails, cleaning the house. The doctors had told us that I had to have like this very sterile antiseptic environment when I go home. So it was really amazing process. By her doing that, I literally had a stream of friends and family and extended friends and family just coming in daily. I wore out the receptionists at the hospital. They were starting to complain about all of the
visitors.
I didn't really have a problem with that. But that for me was huge. That was another healing aspect that really resonated deeply with me, was having the sense of community and people really just sort of behind me and holding this space of being healthy and well. So I was inundated. I was inundated with books, with food, with money. Jana actually found a whole team of people who they replaced my income with all the donations that we received. So it was really an amazing process.
That's amazing. And you're both now giving back, because obviously most of the people that we get on this podcast are mental health therapists, but actually what you've just described is just as important, because I like to look at your stories and think that you've actually done the hardest thing possible. You've been given essentially life-threatening diseases, and you've said, no, I'm not accepting that. I'm going to change that. And in changing your mindset and changing your thoughts, you've actually healed yourself. And I know that you were invited to do a TED talk during COVID, which they recorded. And I know you got some advice about, what you can and can't put in it. I actually remember seeing it and going, there's nothing wrong with that. But they didn't publish it because they said it was too controversial, because obviously, even though you were just talking about your own stories, what they didn't want is obviously people to listen to that and then not have the Western medicine as well as the tips that you were talking about, which I actually thought was a bit unfair, because I didn't think there was anything wrong with that talk at all. But I think you've both, and then of course you both release a book that within a week of each other, and bearing in mind you've actually got similar audiences as well, both become Amazon bestsellers as well. And I know you've been on a lot of podcasts since as a result of that too. So, but your stories are just so incredible, and the fact that you're husband and wife, and it was like different diseases essentially that you were diagnosed with, but you both said, no, I'm not having that. I'm doing something about it. Now, how do you then, or how are you going about? In fact, let's use the next question as an example, because I know you told me a story before we started recording that I thought was a lovely example of this. We used hypotheticals and no identifying factors, but just tell us the story about how you helped that lady in New York this weekend? Because you both are obviously working together and you have your own programs as well.
Oh, yeah. It's a mutual friend of ours, and she's experiencing breast cancer, and just outside of, well, she doesn't have, kind of lost her current support system. So she was asking us questions about how we create a support system for ourselves, and also on what the heck does she eat. So, and she's like, I'm going to the farmer's market, will you come with me? And so we went to the farmer's market with her, and just in way more variety of vegetables than we have here in Boston. I was like, wow. I'm like, you could eat this with this, and then, because essentially you need 26 different greens, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds in your diet per week to keep your microbiome healthy. And I'm like, just do that with this and that with that, and then next thing you know, you have 26. It's easy, especially if you have a farmer's market like this right here at the end of your street.
FYI, my partnership in this was really just to
Walking the dog.
hold the leash for her dog while Jana was doing the talking. So, but what was fascinating with all of this was like more than just the vegetables and giving her that information, it was also the community aspect to the farmer's market. That these are people that she knows, and that she herself had gotten into her head a little bit about what kind of a community is she going to surround herself with, and like, you have communities, you have more communities in your life than you realize. And she realized she had this amazing, beautiful, warm, loving community of people who are farmers coming in that she knows quite well. So she represenced herself to that in that process, and going to a coffee shop right down the road. And she realized she had a whole community of people there. And we were really keying in on making sure she was asking for help, because it's a key aspect to really developing the relationships and communities in your life, as well as, when you ask for help, people respond. I mean, people really are there for supporting you and loving you, and really. And I think one of the key ingredients that I got, and I forgot to mention this earlier, was that love and gratitude are just foundationally key aspects to both of our healing processes. That when you surround yourself with that, miracles happen. And so, and that there's this miraculous aspect to life that begins to show up when you really ground yourself in the realm of love and gratitude. And that's really what we were really coming from when we were with her this weekend.
Yeah.
And you also have to know that she felt a little frazzled by us giving her all this information. So I was wondering how much she was going to take in, but share what we got at the end of the day from her.
Oh, just a text from her saying, I was so moved and so grateful for the time you spent with me today. And I'm clear everything's going to be okay. And then I have a path forward for going through this powerfully. Oh, and she made a healthy dish, and she was all proud of herself. And she said, it really tastes great. I'm really excited to try these new foods out. And so she just was really excited. And I was inspired by that too, because she's willing to take the actions, and she's doing the actions. So, yeah, and we'll be following up with her in an additional, workshop as well. But
yeah.
So you guys are developing programs and workshops, and I know, Dan, you're also working with business as well. So, and you're taking like the metaphors as well as the practicalities of this into your program. So, mindset is key, nutrition's key, obviously exercise, but the mindset behind this is absolutely key and fundamental to everything. And I know that, Dan, you've talked about the obstacle being the way, the poison was actually the route to the recovery. And in Jana's case, it's about, going from hating your disease to loving it. It's that mindset shift. So what sort of other aspects are you kind of bringing into your programs, into your courses as you kind of develop this from the books?
Well, one of the key aspects of my own process that I didn't mention earlier was that Jana was constantly getting me to go for walks during my process of healing. And so that's an aspect of the program that I also incorporate, is making sure that people are moving your body. The body is designed to be moved. And so when one can get outside and breathe that fresh air and get some kind of movement in, I mean, I'm a long distance runner. So for me, traveling distance over spaces is a huge, massive, beautiful experience that I've been doing ever since junior high school. I've been a long distance runner. But whatever form one takes, just get outside, get moving, are aspects. And yoga is a powerful practice.
Mhm.
In fact, I'm aware that when yoga initially came into existence thousands of years ago, it was literally designed to prepare you for meditating. So it's an aspect that I've noticed, that when you do yoga, that you're in this amazing space of take a meditation afterwards. Then maybe take on a practice of visualization. So these are aspects that we're
Yeah, I mean, meditation
incorporating.
is really powerful to do a daily practice. That's part of our program. And then diaphragmatic breathing, as probably a lot of you know, helps calm the amygdala down in case you have some kind of form of PTSD, which I think we all have a version of. But that really makes a difference for a lot of people. Just really helps you get present, because a lot of people say they can't meditate. They can't quiet their mind down. So if that's the case, then breathing is pretty easy for most people to do.
Mhm.
So, that alongside with nutrition that we mentioned.
And I think that people don't really give themselves credit for the idea that they may be meditating more than they realize, even if they don't think they are, which is doing something that's a long, repetitive practice, like running, like walking. There is a meditative aspect to that. So don't dismiss the notion that you can't meditate. And it's something that we all probably are doing more than we realize. So that's an aspect as well. The other part is really incorporating and creating and activating the communities that you live in. Realizing that you have these communities, first and foremost, is probably the most fundamental part. And we sometimes dismiss the idea that we have communities, or it's not as big as we realize. But when we sat down and she and I created that list of 987 people, it kind of blew us away.
Yeah, we knew that many
Because
people.
we were reaching back to former high school classmates, junior high school classmates, grammar school classmates, college classmates, all the work, all the jobs that I've worked in previous organizations. In fact, one of the strongest communities of people that I got response back on was from a company that I had left 20 years earlier. And these people came out of the woodwork to support me. And it was really beautiful to have people coming 2.5, 3 hours away to visit me. So just that magical aspect of having people show up and support you provides an amazing wealth of well-being and feeling good about yourself, that people are showing up for you. And I made it adamantly clear to myself that I wanted to give back to people as much as I could. So I really made the effort and energy to just really focus on what I could give back to them and let them know how profoundly moved I was to have them show up. I had an uncle who showed up and he gave me a book, and he was there to support me. And he was so moved by how I was being with him that at the end, he told my mother, his sister, that he said, I went there to boost him up. He ended up boosting me up when I left. He said, so he was really inspired by that.
I love that. And I know you had a school reunion recently where you went and there's people that you didn't even know were coming up to you and saying thank you for the book as well.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And obviously I focus on loving your disease, because a lot of people hate their disease. And it seems like when I had MS, I was so angry and pissed off. I was in my 30s and had this bloody disease. And the angrier I got, the worse it got. So, but I did the mind body medicine program. I really got that the gratitude and love it. How could I love they didn't say how you love your disease, but that's my own interpretation ways you could actually be grateful for, that your body's talking to you and communicating, and what is it saying, and then just, trying to be grateful for it every day. And then once I made that shift, and started seeing MS as a sensory awareness tool, that I was either super stressed about something, or I was having way too much negative mind chatter. That's when I got present to that, I really realized I loved it, and I was grateful that I had this like wake up call for my life, like to really take on my life. And I just started seeing the positive things about it. And then once I saw that, I think things started to actually get better for me health wise. So,
Wow, that.
yeah.
Okay, so obviously the books have been, fundamental in helping you get the word out there. But what other marketing techniques have you used that have been successful?
Getting on podcasts.
Podcasts have been really, really powerful.
Facebook Lives has been great.
Creating a Facebook group.
One-on-one, face-to-face interactions with people has been really powerful. And I noticed that the more I do that, there's more unpredictable, amazing results that show up. I mean, we had 2 fantastic conversations on our trip back from New York.
With different people.
Different people. Yeah.
Just sharing your story with multiple people, as many people as you can.
I love that. Now, obviously, you've written a book, and you're now turning those books into programs and workshops, which I know you're going to be releasing next week. But on the subject of books, and I think keep it sort of relevant to your conditions. What were the books that helped you or inspired you in your recovery the most?
Oh, my recovery the most. Well, when I was going through MS, honestly, the first book I read that was inspiring to me and gave me hope was "It's Not About the Bike" by Lance Armstrong. And I know it was about cancer, but it didn't matter. He beat this cancer that he wasn't really supposed to beat. And, obviously back then it was a different story, but with his success, but that was my first motivation to go, okay, well, if he could beat this unbeatable cancer, then I can overcome MS. And that was before I did anything else. So that was my first glimmer of hope that I got, was just by reading somebody else's story. And then I just started reading other people's stories of overcoming health and healing.
And Dan, what was yours?
So for me, there was a mutual friend of ours who showed up, and she was retiring, and she was going on a cross-country trip, and she walked into the room and she said, "You are healed, I can already tell." And she handed me a book, and the book was written by a woman named Anita Morjani, and it's titled "Dying to Be Me." It's literally about a woman who's riddled with cancers throughout her entire body, organ cancers, blood cancers, every kind of cancer you could imagine. And she'd lived her life afraid that she was going to get cancer, and then she got cancer. And she then dropped into a coma, and she actually had what they call an NDE, a near-death experience. And when she came back from that experience, literally within about 48 to 72 hours, the cancer started leaving her body, and the doctors and nurses were stunned. So within about 4 days, almost all of the cancers had gone. And it's a really powerful, fascinating book that I was inspired by. And I noticed that for me, it had reminded me of my own experience being a hospice volunteer. I had actually for years been very deathly afraid of my own death, and finally resolved it by actually dealing with it head on and doing this amazing experience with hospice nurses, and really becoming profoundly moved by being with people who were related to the people that were terminally ill. The people that were terminally ill actually didn't really need our help as much as the family and people around them. And I was just really amazed, moved, and inspired. And the biggest thing I got from that whole experience was live your life fully, and communicate. And so I resolved my whole issue with death and dying by just taking that approach. But this book, Dying to Be Me, was so profound in the sense that healing is within us at all times. And I became more and more present to the idea that health and healing is constantly going on in your body. We just are not aware of it. Like when you cut yourself, the body is starting to heal it right away. And we just have to get ourselves and our mind out of the way.
I love that. Now, I'm going to open this up to physical health as well, but what are your top tips in the world today for both physical and mental health? And you can choose or pick both.
Physical and mental health. Just keep moving. I mean, for me, I would say either have a community that you do fitness with, or even if it's online. Since a lot of things have transitioned to online, I'm still addicted to online yoga now. I can't imagine going to a yoga studio again, but I know I'll get there. But and then also community. I have a community online that I do strength training with. It's a women's group. So that makes a difference for me. In the past, I used to do a lot of. I would always sign up for a race of some sort because I was a runner and triathlete and cyclist. And whenever I had that end goal in mind, I'd always could plan backwards, and I knew I couldn't skip a day. And it reminds me I need to sign up for something now myself again. Yeah, just having something like that, a community, really makes a difference with the physical fitness as well. I mean, I used to have a neighbor, it was even the best if you could find somebody, a neighbor, and like a swimming program that she'd show up at my door every day. 6 a.m. And it was like, oh no, there's Katie. She's at my door. She was never late.
Yeah.
And then we'd walk to swimming, which was at 6:30. So, yeah, no, it really makes a difference if you can find a buddy. Yeah, that's the hugest part for fitness.
Dr. Susie was saying last week she's got a running buddy that shows up on the doorstep 6 o'clock. She can't not go.
Oh, yeah, I need to find that again. She moved and swimming stopped. Everything stopped for a while, but yeah, I gotta find that again. So I do have Dan. Yes. We do motivate each other, like, hey, you slug, get off couch and get going. So it helps to have a physical partner or a buddy. Yeah, that's the best thing for fitness.
Yeah. For me, I would say getting outside and walking every day, or doing some kind of exercise once a day, but getting outside. I mean, especially in this day and age where, electronics really sort of overtake our lives. Getting that experience of just breathing and getting breath in your body is really powerful. I mean, I'm a runner. I love to run. It's just, it's me, but any kind of exercise, any kind of movement, but especially getting outside.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. And finally, for the chance to win 2, not just 1, but 2 Therapist to Millions t-shirts, or unless you just have one and argue over it. Tell us a fact that blows our mind, or tell us a joke that's one of a kind. Now you've got to tell you've got to tell one of each then, really.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay.
You can't just tell 1 to get 2 shirts. You got to tell 2, and it can be a fact and a joke, or 2 jokes or 2 facts. What have you got?
Mine is, which probably if you're a therapist, you probably already know, but that experts estimate that the mind thinks roughly 80,000 thoughts a day. That's an average of around 3,300 thoughts an hour. And according to the National Science Foundation, 80% of our thoughts are negative.
Oh my goodness. There you go. That's a fact.
And 95%, yeah, and 95% of those are repetitive. Oh my God. So anyway, getting past the mind is key.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's mine.
Mine is that it's this notion that everything is connected to everything else, and that the myth that our minds try to convince us is that we're separate from everyone and everyone else. And so John Muir was a great explorer, Scottish explorer all across, who explored all of the lands across the United States. And he was the founder of all of the national parks. And he once said that when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find that it's bound fast by 1,000 invisible cords that can't be broken to everything in the universe. So, yeah.
Love that. That's so cool. Fantastic. Well, there's a couple of T-shirts on their way to you in the post. And finally, how do people get in contact with you, especially as you're going to be developing these programs 2023? So if people are interested, how can they get hold of you?
Go to my website at www.danieljunkins.com.
Nice. And mine is janascolten.com.
Okay, fantastic. We'll put the links in the show notes, so anyone who's interested can click on there and register their interest about your future events. And it just leaves it for me to say thank you so much for both of you for sharing your incredible stories. And the fact that you are husband and wife and you've both essentially been down the same pathway and you're now sharing it in the same way with different books and different ways of actually delivering that story and that content is fantastic. And there'll be people out there right now who are either listening to this, who have either personal experience of this, or they know someone who they would want you to be helping and kind of pointing in this direction. So, may you continue to share your knowledge and share your experiences and expertise and save lives. You are literally a pair of superheroes.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this week's episode of the Therapist to Millions podcast, may we invite you to check out our free for life Therapist to Millions online membership course for therapists and coaches who want to grow their business without trading more time for dollars. We've created the world's premier digital marketing resource exclusively for therapists, and it's yours for free for life. Just head over to therapisttomillions.com and sign up now.